Alright, I've had a few good videos around here in this channel over the past few months, so let me see if I can get one to tank. Welcome everybody, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and if you're kind of curious about that YouTube tanking video comment, stick around to after the end of the build process and I'll explain what I meant. So there's a whole story about why I built this guy right here. This is a cajon. It's a type of drum percussion instrument. And this is indeed my secret woodworking video that I kind of teased months ago on just some random video that I built. And yes, it's probably the most popular type of woodworking build tutorial here on YouTube, but I thought I'd take it up a bit of a notch. So instead of making a cheap, crappy plywood or MDF one, this guy is solid hardwood. It's made of oak and poplar, and okay, to be fair, the snare plate is actually cedar, which is not really a hardwood, but the snare plate is not part of this build process. That was something I added on later. All right, well, let's get started with building this guy from the scratch. Building this guy from the ground up. That sounds better, doesn't it? So here are the 4 boards I'm going to be using for the build process. I've got 2 red oaks, I got 2 poplars. Let's take a look at the design. So I'm going to have 4 boards to make up the sides and the top of the instrument. Terrible drawing, but you get the idea. To get the continuous waterfall edge, I need to make sure the pieces are cut in sequential order. So I'm going to have an 18-inch side for each of them, a 12-inch top, and then another 18-inch side. Also, I'm going to be using the wavy joints that I worked on a few videos ago. So therefore, each board is going to overlap the other one by about 0.75 inches. In order to accommodate that type of cut, I need to have some screws drilled in the ends of the board. So therefore, I need an additional, we'll say, 3 inches of board space on the bottom and top of each of these boards. So therefore, let's add all that up. This would be 54 inches long for the main boards of the instrument. So I've got the layout of the boards here. It's going to go oak, poplar, and now I got to make the wavy joints between the boards. How this is going to happen is I'm going to draw a 3/4 inch line in from this edge of the red oak and then this edge of the poplar, and eventually repeat that process across all of them. And one at a time then, I'm going to overlay the boards. I'm going to drive 3 screws in the bottom as well as the top of the boards, take it over the bandsaw, and cut out the wavy joint. The key thing is when running on the bandsaw is that the saw blade does not leave that 3/4 inch line I draw. If it does, then you're going to get some gaps in your joints and it's not going to look correct. One thing I found for cutting these long boards here in the bandsaw, because they are a bit unwieldy due to their length and frankly the oak is pretty heavy, is I've screwed the top board down to a 1x4 basic pine board. You know, anything you find at home center for construction purposes. Therefore, that gives the entire piece a nice solid flat base for when you're running it across the table of the bandsaw, and it's a lot easier to cut that way than trying to do some weird balancing act. Alright, I got all the 4 pieces cut and jointed together more or less. So there are a few issues I'll have to deal with, but we can take care of that after I glue everything up. Let's get these pieces on the parallel clamps. So while that's drying, let's talk about the back and the bottom of the cajon. Now it's going to be built in a very similar manner with the rest of the hardwood pieces I had for the sides. Now, however, the difference is going to be the order of the boards, because the very back board on the main body of the instrument, at least the sides and the top, is poplar. So what I want to do is put the 2 oak pieces here on the sides and then have the 2 insides be poplar for the back. As for the bottom, no one's going to see that, so I don't really care how it looks. It's just going to be made from the same wood. But for the most part, the rest of the process in terms of doing the wavy cuts, all that fun stuff, well, it's the exact same thing we just did. Our two panels are done that are going to make up the sides and top of the cajon, and then the back and the bottom are over here. And I did that without starting a fire. I almost did though. In fact, there's still just a tiny bit of a lingering odor of burning sawdust around here. Apparently that bandsaw I have, well, this task here of cutting these wavy joints, especially through the red oak, it can handle the poplar all right, but the red oak is pretty challenging. And that kind of job really should be done with a real bandsaw and not the $150 special you get from Home Depot. So just keep that in mind. It sort of worked, but it was struggling by the end. Something wasn't right. I'm not sure what I did to the bandsaw, but regardless, let's talk next steps. So I do need to fix a few small holes in the joinery. Those wavy joints didn't line up perfectly. And how we're going to approach this is a very simple technique that's used all the time in woodworking. We're going to make some sawdust from our leftover scraps of wood here using an orbital sander or some other tool that can collect the dust. Mix that with some wood glue and then fill in the holes between the joints. After that's all done, I'm going to hit both panels with the orbital sander to get a nice even finish, and we'll go from there on the building process. Now I could spend a bunch of time aggressively sanding down the missed joints using the multi-tool, or as you can see from all the shavings around here, the better way is just to get the right tool for the right job. Well, the planar oopsies are, they're resolved to a satisfactory level at the moment. Still kind of new to that tool. In fact, I just bought it for this project, so there's still some, everything is a little bit of a learning curve. But let's move on to the next steps in terms of cutting this board into multiple pieces to do the waterfall edge, and this is where you can really screw things up. This is kind of do or die here. So this is the back side here, so it's got all the rough crap I can write on. How this cut's going to break down, either side we've got the 2 to 3 inches of crap we got to cut off. Then somewhere in here we got about 18 inches, that's going to be the side. And then about 12 inches more we've got the top. Well, you know, I'm going to do a 1 and a 1. So that way I'll have the numbers that line up the cuts, but obviously these are all approximates. And then another 18 inches over here or so for the other side. That one and that one are lined up correctly. I got a corner jig over there to kind of give me an idea what's going on. But I've got two sides here left to match up. This is the back of the cajon, and that's the bottom over there. I'm doing this intentionally because the top, that is obviously the most important one for the whole waterfall edge, so I can't take any material off there without risking damaging that effect. So I can take stuff off the back and the bottom without issue because that's going to be hidden. Now, the back's pretty easy. This runs along the grain, so I can use a planer here to line these two up. This down here is a little bit more annoying because it is end grain. Apparently planers don't work well in end grain, they cause damage, so I got to use my orbital sander or something else to clean that up. So let me get them clamped down and we'll go through that process. Now you're at the point where you got to be very careful. If you screw something up, well, you've ruined everything. We're at the point where we're cutting the miters for the waterfall edge. And the one thing to note here about using a circular saw for that, at least my circular saw, it only cuts the 45 miters in one direction. So you got to think ahead of time which direction you got to go across the board to ensure you get the miter in the right angle. Now, also it turns out instead of having some convoluted setup for cutting the cross cuts here on these longer boards, you can just buy a 12-inch speed square. What do you know? Only like $9. Yeah, should have done that before. Let's cut some wood. All right, well that was a bit of a struggle, but I'm good to go now. I kind of gave up on this jig here. There's clearly some other trick to how you use it and I wasn't able to figure it out, but I got a system that works and I got my miter corners together. Now let's move on to the back, get that ready, get the bottom ready, get a few things cleaned up here. And then I'm gonna have to cut this down to fit the opening in the back and do something similar for the bottom. Yeah, so that's not exactly a circle, but you know what can help me out? My friend, the 3D printer. Let's do some template routing. Well, getting a lot closer to finishing things up. Back's in place. Do the same thing for the bottom and the front, and then we'll see how it sounds. Well, the build is getting along, or coming along pretty well here. It's structurally all together. There's a few issues I need to work out here and definitely some final touches to it. It does rock a little bit, so I need to fix that. Alright guys, so thank you all for watching. Once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and let me finish up with a little YouTube comment earlier that I started the video off with, because it's kind of interesting if you're kind of new to the whole YouTube video content production, blah 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 thing. So, when it comes to getting successful videos on YouTube, the biggest factor that I found so far, kind of listening to what other people have to say and then applying those ideas to my analytics for the past 4 or 5 months here, is a click-through rate. So when YouTube presents your video to somebody, whether they click on it, yes or no, how many times that happens relative to how many times it's shown to people is probably the main driving factor as to whether your video keeps getting presented to more and more people and therefore more views. Now, when you release a video on YouTube, it shows your video, its impression, to a relatively small portion of your audience, which presumably, but I don't know for sure, presumably is mostly your subscribers and maybe a few people who are not your subscribers that may be interested in this particular content. The problem is when I've got a main focus on my channel of painting miniatures and tabletop game stuff, in particular Battletech and a little bit of robotics, a woodworking project like building a Hardwood Cajon, it's going to be presented to that audience, which for the most part probably isn't interested in it because that's not like their hobby. And therefore, a video that's totally different than your main content will probably get a relatively low click-through rate during the first 48 hours or so, and that can cause basically the video to have very long-term poor performance. It won't be completely cut off, but it's gonna basically demote the video to lower in rank, especially on a topic that's very common like building a cajon. So we'll see what happens. You never know, it might be successful. If not, oh well. I had shot this video months ago before I started doing the whole analytics and details of YouTube stats and algorithm stuff. So I figured, hey, I've already got filled out and filmed. Let's just edit it together and call it done. So if you genuinely enjoy more tabletop game related stuff, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and we'll see some new stuff coming up for Battletech, Warcaster, and there is one more video left for Micro Flash Delta. It keeps getting pushed back a few weeks because, well, I bought something relatively large. I'm trying to get assembled for the end of that video. You'll see what that is when things come out. So thank you guys all for watching. Once again, I'm Jason, probably said that twice, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. So have a great week.